Seagate United. Like, what we gotta do is meet everybody on 149th Street at the bench.
Hey guys, welcome back to the bench. In today's video, I want to go ahead and show you guys a couple of tips for advanced throw-ups. And for this, we're gonna go to none other than Monks, because the guy's got some of the nastiest throw-ups you'll ever see. Now stay to the end of the video, that way you don't miss any of the tips for throw-ups. Look at this gorgeous page. Keep in mind, he's got some straight letters mixed in here like this one right here. But take a second to really appreciate what he's doing with some of the throw-ups here. Now I gotta preface, if you're still learning graffiti, if you're still beginning, your throw-ups typically lack a lot of negative space. But the more advanced you become, the more your throw-ups kind of play around with that rule, and the more negative space you might see in more advanced throw-ups. As you begin to add more negative space, throw-ups tend to also gain more structure as a result of that. And this kind of gets really close to some throw-ups being a straight letter, but there is still a definitive line. Now when we check out his work, we'll see a lot of reoccurring features in his throw-ups, and these features are actually common amongst all throw-ups, amongst every graffiti artist. You see, when you're looking at throw-ups, there's certain things that you can do that are just kind of standard practice. They're not really considered biting because they're just the essential tools for throw-ups. Let me show you a couple of examples. A great example being this rolling circular form right here. This kind of little nudge that pops out is another great example. He's got a lot of hairpin turns, which is also a pretty good example of something you'll see pretty common in throw-ups. And you also have your typical serifs in throw-ups, as well as your typical forms in throw-ups that you'll see throughout a lot of his work. Now he does an absolutely masterful job of bringing these different elements together in a unique way. And that's really what kind of separates his throw-ups from many other people's throw-ups. I don't know how many times I'm going to say throw-ups in this video. It's going to be a lot. My apologies ahead of time if you're playing a drinking game to this. And that's really all it takes. This is a supreme example of when I tell you that style is really just exaggerating the fundamentals. You have a couple of fundamental things you work with in throw-ups, and he's exaggerating those in order to get more unique aesthetics overall. I notice a lot of his work really heavily relies on letter uniformity, which is an extremely powerful tool in throw-ups. You can see the more square formations taking shape here on this top pink throw-up, and it's consistent throughout pretty much all of the letters. So he's still paying attention to fundamentals like that, but also he's looking at things like balance, right, and letter name weight. We can see that perfectly executed here, where he has a massive M and then the S to balance that out. All the other letters fit nicely in the middle. If you're a more advanced graffiti artist, feel free to try that in your own work, and if you're a newer graffiti artist, definitely use those reoccurring shapes in yours. Because once again, stuff like this is standard practice in throw-ups. Now we got this next image here, and this is a prime example of him using the more typical aesthetics of throw-ups in his work, right? Once again, you have the rolling circle, which is an extremely common thing in his work. We don't have to highlight them all, but you get the point, they're pretty frequent. We also have, once again, the typical top that you'll see on a lot of throw-ups, and those hairpin turns reoccurring once again. This should go to show you guys that you really don't have to do these crazy elaborate extensions. You can find creative ways in order to work these shapes in there. Now, one thing I really admire about his throw-ups is the fact that he's not afraid to have a letter rest right on top of another letter. Because throw-ups typically have that more tight negative space management, that letter name positioning, it allows him to really play with that. It allows him to go ahead and position one letter directly on top of another. But notice when he does this, he still maintains the letter structure in a clear manner. That's really important because oftentimes, if you take one letter and you move it too close to another letter, you start to lose the letter structures a little bit. And he's very careful not to do that. You can see that here on the M. Whereas M comes there, that's the centerpiece of the M. Here you still have a structure popping out, so that's pretty clear and concise. You got this form of the leg of the M there, so that is also pretty well developed. But then he just puts a hint of the letter O in there, that way you see it. It doesn't take much, but he's developed the letter structure of the O, and despite the fact that it is pretty small, he makes sure that the other letters, such as the N and the K, don't overshadow it too much, as they also are pretty small, fitting snugly between the larger M and the larger S. Which actually seems to be a little bit of an artist habit of his. In order to have a little bit of a smaller O, that seems to be like a reoccurring thing in his work. So if you're a more advanced graffiti artist, try that in your own work. Try to position letters in your throw-up really close together and see if there's any fundamentals that you can mess with in a new and interesting way. Now check out this piece. I really fell in love with this. This has to be one of my favorite pieces of his, and I mean, just look at it. It's beautiful. The colors are gorgeous. But let me go ahead and point out the letters for any of you guys who might be new to graffiti. So you have the M right here, right? Pretty dope. A lot of letter distortions, lots of style added to it. And then he goes ahead and tucks the O in right there, nice and small. Once again, it's a little bit of an artist habit. The N comes around just about there, and it fuses its structure with the K. So you have the K's backing right there, the stem of the K, if you will, and then the front, and then the leg of it. Now he takes the leg of the K and he fuses it directly into the S and shoots it right up there. Not bad at all. Despite the fact there's a lot of style, the letter structures are still pretty clear, and they're properly done as well. So all of the style didn't take away from his fundamentals. He's also doing the same thing he does with his throw-ups, he's doing it here too. He's positioning his letters really close together. As we can see, there's pretty much no negative space between his M and his O, and his O and his N. They're right on top of one another. And typically when you fuse letters together, there tends to be a little bit of negative space, not much. So we're seeing that here between the N and the K. There's pretty much nothing there. This piece is dope. I love this piece. Such a unique style from this dude. That's really what I enjoy about him. And we see more of that here. Once again, you're seeing those really standard shapes that we see in throw-ups, right? You got the typical serif coming out once again. You got the typical body of some letters and those more circular motions. Oh, dude, but I didn't even see this. I love this right here. I love how he actually didn't develop some of the lines. He just suggests the structure with really efficient line work here. Beautiful, beautiful work. Now, the tip I want to give you guys here is there's something we're going to refer to as an in line. This is going to refer to any line that goes into the letter, such as this, for example, or this, or this, or this, or this, or anything like it. When you're doing your throw-up, it really helps out a bunch if you take those lines and you dig them in there deep. Just look at this M, for example. Had we had that same exact M, but we shortened this line, you see how much structure we lose out on? Now, if we consistently end up shortening those sorts of in lines, you'll see how we quickly begin to lose an immense amount of structure, even by just reducing these lines by a little bit. Now that doesn't look anywhere near as good. You can really help build structure with those inlines, because what they do is they really go ahead and illustrate a differentiation between two boxes. When you do an inline, it tells us that there's one box to the side and another box to another side, right? So we have that inline, and that tells us this right here is the first middle section of the M, and then this line over here is the second middle section of the M. Same thing here, right? So the first inline here lets us know that this box is just this part of the letter N. This inline here illustrates the centerpiece, and it lets us know that there's another box to the right. So now once you go ahead and you illustrate this part of the N, we've illustrated our letter N. That's the power behind inlines. That's what they're used for. That's how you go ahead and you develop structure with a lack of negative space. Because remember from the beginning of the video, negative space allows for letter structures to take place. But since we don't have negative space in our throw-ups, we need to compensate for that with some other fundamental. And the fundamental here is going to be line. Line will illustrate our letter structure instead of negative space doing it. Now, a couple things to keep in mind when you're messing with the negative space management of your throw-up. This puts you at an extremely high risk to distort letter structure, which we kind of already went over in the video. But it also means your letter name weight is also going to be heavily distorted. So you're going to have to kind of keep an eye on that and, adjust it when needed. And as always, because you're messing with negative space management and letter positioning, you're bound to run into flow issues. This is probably why we see him use a lot of letter uniformity in his letters. But a tighter negative space management and letter name positioning gives you an increased opportunity for line uniformity and similarity. If you need more information on flow and how it functions, I have a full video tutorial on it right up here. Now, messing with negative space management and letter name positioning is not the only way in order to get more advanced throw-ups. It really comes from the inclusion of more shapes, because throw-ups are very shape-based. And as you include more shapes, the throw-up becomes more technical. But you don't want to include so many to the point where you're bringing the throw-up to a straight letter standard, because if that's happening, well, then you're no longer doing a throw-up at that point. So there is a balancing act in order to go ahead and do there. While it's not common for throw-ups to have extensions, compressed extensions are welcome on throw-ups, provided that you can make them work without giving them too much structure. We see that multiple times in his own throw-ups. As we all know, serifs are also welcome on throw-ups, and they also abide by the same thing where, if you do them too much and too structured, well, then you kind of get into straight letter territory, but within reason, they can be a great accent on a throw-up. But dudes, let me know what you guys think about his work in the comments down below, and be sure to go ahead and check him out. I linked him in the description, and I'll also leave him in the pinned comment as well. He's got phenomenal work. Now, if you're new here and you want to learn more about graffiti, check out the best tutorials on graffiti right here on the top playlist. And down here at the bottom, we got some more graffiti content for you. But with all that said, I'll catch you guys next week. Until then, peace.